Let's turn our attention now to the papers, joined now by Noah Khogali, who's a political commentator. Noah, good morning to you.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Yeah, really well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on TalkTV. It's much appreciated. Now, we've got a lot of work to do. So, in addition to the stories that you've picked out from the papers, we've got the front pages. Let's start with the Daily Mail. Why not? Because it's a veritable feast of entertainment. Oh, how I've missed it whilst I've been away. Oh, the anger, the bile that shoots itself from the front pages of the Mail. Meghan, quote, bullying, unquote, inquiry buried. Findings of a palace probe into claims that the Duchess drove out two traumatised assistants will never be made public. This story is on many of the front pages here, there and everywhere. If there's an inquiry, doesn't one expect at least to have, even if it's just the top line, we expect to hear something. If something's entirely and completely private, it kind of makes you wonder, well, why the hell did they bother in the first place?
Yeah, it's a weird one. Once it's in the public eye and there's obvious public interest, it's on the front page of papers, it feels like the royal family should at least be giving a very, very brief overview of the findings. They don't need to give the detail. They don't need to give any specifics, name any names, but they just need to give an overview of the result, and that would hopefully instill a little bit of public confidence. And it's a little odd.
It is a little bit odd, and this is why I'm concerned, because I think that there are people within the royal institution, not necessarily the royals themselves, and I know that the Queen said this is a private matter, but that was probably written by one of her flunkies anyway. And yes, it is a private matter, and it doesn't necessarily need to be explained in total. However, if you have an institution that is funded by us, the people, and whether directly or indirectly, and indeed they are working on our behalf, there should be a level of scrutiny and there should be a level of transparency. And I think it's that transparency that is the biggest problem with the royal family, that if you don't have transparency, and also if you don't have a measure of humility in respect of how they operate, then I'm afraid we're then dealing with something that is becoming increasingly detached and out of date.
Yeah, absolutely. I think across, public bodies, you end up seeing this opaqueness when it comes to stuff like bullying quite regularly. And I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of look to the royal family as hopefully a bastion of not that and something a little bit more positive. If this had happened, say, in Downing Street or Whitehall, you'd expect there to be an element of closing of ranks. But you hope that it doesn't happen when it gets to the royals. So,
do you think, though,
that might be rose-tinted.
Do you think, though, that we've got a problem, though, that the royal family don't think that there is this level of scrutiny that, I mean, obviously, look, they know that every move that they make is going to be looked into. But I think that there are aspects of, as soon as you move away from Her Majesty the Queen and that direct line of accession, then you start to see that maybe there doesn't need to be the accountability that maybe there should be. That when you, for example, any hope that Prince Andrew has of coming back and doing anything in public life, it really should have been knocked on the head right quickly and immediately. And I think the damage that has done has been huge. And then also, there's an interesting piece in today's Mail that says, Palace prioritise peace whatever the cost to their staff. Allegations that the Duchess of Sussex systematically targeted and bullied female staff have been deeply troubling and problematic for the royal family since they were aired last year. It was the first time a member of the royal family had been subject of a formal complaint to senior management about their alleged behaviour. So I guess what we're seeing here again is a closing of ranks, that certain behaviours were tolerated because they didn't want to rock the boat.
Yeah, I think part of what you've got to kind of work out, and it's hard to from the outside, is about who is making these decisions. Because the royal family isn't, although we call it a family, that's not the way it operates. It essentially is operating as a business with lots of senior advisors who essentially are pointing it in a direction, and that's the way we go. It's not the Queen who's going, we're not going to tell the public the outcome of this investigation. It will be somebody who is not a royal but employed by the royals to give advice, and that might be the question that we need to be asking. Who are those people, and are they really the right people to be doing it? Because a few times over the past few years, the Andrew example is a very good one, questions have to be asked about whether they've been doing the exact right thing for preserving their public image.
Number 10, fears Prime Minister faces kangaroo court. Allies say Johnson will not get a fair hearing over allegation that he misled Parliament. That's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. But also they say Palace to keep report of Duchess bullying inquiry secret. But also on the inner pages, hopes dashed as the firms, nothing to see here. Policy suggests blood is thicker than water. Bullying inquiry leaves the world in the dark. And then also we've got another story. Prince would turn down bag filled with cash were it offered today. That story reaches the front page of many of the papers. So, for example, Daily Express, Charles would never take suitcase of cash again. The I newspaper, £2.6 million boost for Prince Charles, who will never accept cash in suitcase. The Times newspaper, troops surge to defend NATO's east from Putin, but also charity vow after Charles feels heat over Qatari cash. £100 million for the Royals, rein it in, they say. This is according to the Mirror. Record payment for payout for the firm for taxpayer as the nation feels the pinch. And the Guardian avoids all royal stories talking about Tory privatisation linked to increase in NHS death rates. And rebels plot to take over to force PM from office. Though, just back to that other story, though, do you think that there's a misunderstanding as to how much an institution like the royal family costs to run, but then also how much money it actually brings in for the nation?
It's difficult. For lots of these things, when we talk about public perception, the public, when you talk about huge numbers, it seems very scary. So 100 million, for example, sounds like an absolutely astronomical amount, and it is. But in terms of the running of a country, that's not actually incredibly significant. It's nothing in comparison to NHS spending, for example, which runs into billions. These numbers are massive, and almost every source would suggest that the royal family overall brings in money to the UK.
But do you think, though,
obviously about efficiency, but not about the worthwhile nature of it even as a financial institution.
Do you think, though, that part of the problem here is that because we're dealing with an individual and then you see how an individual then runs their life, that, for example, an institution like the NHS, the only time that we get cross is, say, for example, a really expensive bit of equipment is bought, then that's not a problem. But if there is somebody who's at the top of management and suddenly they're receiving hundreds of thousands of pounds, then we do get a bit shirty. In the same way that when we see, for example, in the private lives of the royal family, that they start living it up and doing all sorts of things that we think, OK, that's quite an expensive way to live your life, then that's where the £100 million starts to bristle. And also, we don't necessarily look at the things that they're doing. That they'll hold a lot of drinks parties, but those drinks parties are there to either celebrate achievement or further national or international relations.
Yeah, it's a very good point. But it is also, not all of that money is coming from the taxpayer. Lots of it's coming from the royal estate and just getting, handed to them because it's revenue that they create. We don't get mad at, some CEO that spends lots of money on himself and his own private life. It's still not coming from the taxpayer. And I think that's the difference. Just because they're a state asset doesn't mean that every single person that is struggling with potentially the cost of living at the moment is paying out their own money to the royal family. That's not what's happening. But that's a quite easy trap to fall into, I think thinking that.
Just a quick word, a lot of discussion on tennis. Of course, it's Wimbledon. And we always build up the hopes, if you like, of the nation on the basis that I think that our tennis machine, I'm afraid, is not up to scratch. I don't think that we're going to produce the huge stars that other countries do until or unless we put more money into the sport and until we have a better governing body that's going to really apply itself in a way that means that we have many champions as opposed to the odd one or two. No joy as Raducanu and Murray crash out. Hard Brexit, they say. I thought Emma Raducanu did pretty well in her press conference, though, when she said, look, I'm 19, I'm pretty young. But I think she has moved from one coach to another. I think expectations have probably been too high, and they're partly too high because there aren't many people to choose from. You need almost 30 great players, not 3. And we need to get more people playing at all sorts of levels, and we need to remove this view that tennis, for example, and I have an interest, I'm a chair of a tennis club, there is a view that tennis is a snooty sport. We've got to stop all that nonsense. It's a great sport. Get out and play it.
Yeah, I feel quite sorry for Emma Raducanu, to be honest. She does feel like someone, and I'm not some great tennis analysis, but she does feel like someone with a lot of attention or a lot of potential who got her break really quickly, was then kind of piled on with lots of media attention, turned out to be a fantastically charismatic person. But the media then ended up framing her as, God's great gift to tennis, which at the moment, she's 19, she's not. And it seems like people were expecting her, for a very brief time at least, to go through and win every single tournament possible, because she was quite clearly this, lovely girl. She was British. Everybody could get behind her. But she is 19, and in very, very, very few other sports would you expect a 19-year-old to be a world beater straight off the bat. But she got, everything fell into place with her. But it's not kept going. And that's a hard thing with lots of young sports people. And that's why you see massive mental health issues with young sports people, especially, actually.
Exactly, because you can never be that good again. Noah, we're going to get some stories that you've picked out from the papers in just a few moments' time. You're listening to me, James Max, here on TalkTV, live from the Talk Radio studios. More stories from the papers are next. Meanwhile, let's go to Noah, and the first story talks about UK defence spending. So there's a lot of chat about all this money and resource that we're going to be throwing at things, but there appears to be a right old row about money. Noah, what's going on?
Well, this is the first big cabinet row that we've seen for a little while, which I think is really, really significant. So obviously the Conservative, I think it was in the manifesto, promised to make sure that defence spending was kept above inflation, which obviously at the moment is an absolutely massive amount of money. So obviously the Treasury have been somewhat resisting that because, to be fair, that is their job. But that seems to have caused a little bit of a rift between the Treasury and Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Ben Wallace. Obviously, those two being Foreign Secretary, Defence Secretary, it's a massive, massive thing to them. Liz Truss is at the G7 at the moment, and she is, pitching high defence spending to everybody. So having a row about whether you're going to raise spending at home is not ideal. It looks like there'll be about a £1.7 billion real terms cut to military spending if it's not kept in line with inflation. And that is obviously something that Ben Wallace is very, very upset about. There is a really interesting dynamic here. Sorry, go on, Jim.
Yeah, no, all I was going to say is that at this point in time, there are a couple of interesting things about this. First of all, the graph that has been circulating, which demonstrates the relationship between the amount we're spending on defence compared to the amount that we're spending on health, and that 30-year change and paradigm shift. We, as a country, in my opinion, are going to have to get used to the fact that we are underspending on defence. We are going to have to spend more. The electorate is going to demand more spending on defence, and the government had better wake up to this, haven't they?
Absolutely, I 100% think so. I think, to be honest, what has probably happened is the government have thought that in previous times where there have been, cost of living issues, the public haven't been hugely happy with spending money on the military. The current world is obviously very, very different, and I think it would go down very, very differently. And we are in a situation where it's not an arms race per se, but we need to be well stocked in terms of our military, and there does need to be more classical ideas about the way that we defend our country. We have. It seemed like we were trying to move away from stuff like tanks and planes, where that now looks like that might have not been the right call, at least for now, until technology progresses a little bit more.
Let's talk about the FT. There is a chummy relationship between Joe Biden and President Erdogan from Turkey, although I don't know whether we have to call Turkey under its new name.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one. He's a man you kind of feel might have gotten on better with Trump. But obviously Turkey, in the past couple of days, removed their objection to new NATO memberships. And although Biden very publicly yesterday was saying that this new chummy relationship wasn't because of any backhand deals, it does look like the US is going to be happy to start selling fighter pilots to Turkey in some grand coincidence that has nothing to do with Turkey pulling their objection.
And there's definitely not a trade deal or something else sweetening this at all either, is there?
Absolutely not.
No, nothing to see here.
No Kurdish militants getting extradited from the Nordic states either.
Nothing like that. Unbelievable. Okay, if one wanted to go to university, it's a very long time since I went, but if one does want to go, it's going to be quite tricky this year, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this was a story that everybody should have seen coming. When you give schools the right to basically decide their own results, you're going to get grade inflation. And the issue is that it looks like state school grade inflation went up by about 0.3%, so people were getting more than they expected, and that private school grade inflation went up by 0.7%. So you've got now a lot more students getting a lot better results, and that's obviously put pressure on the universities. And with the inflationary issues as well, that has meant that the universities are under financial pressure and probably don't want to be just taking anybody and everybody if they can get international students that are paying a little bit more. So there's going to be this massive issue for school leavers now, after the largest ever university intake last year, to get in, even if they've got really, really high-level grades.
Now, just before we get to the next story that I want to hear from you on, one of the stories that is appearing in all the papers is this, that Tesco is now facing shortages of Heinz baked beans, ketchup and salad cream after a fallout with the US brand over price increases. I guess the question is, well, is Tesco really fighting for themselves or their own profit margins, or you know, who are they really fighting for on the basis that Tesco's profits really are sort of sky high? And I suppose, you know, shoppers, they're going to have to go elsewhere if they want to go and buy Heinz products. I mean, my view would be, don't bother going to Tesco's. If you want to go and get Heinz baked beans, go to Sainsbury's, Asda, Aldi, or my favourite, Farm Foods. Go anywhere else. You'll find them there, and they'll probably be cheaper.
Yeah, well, all the way back in March, Tesco's did make this a very, very public pledge that they were going to protect the consumer and protect the ordinary person at the same time as their profits were skyrocketing. And it does seem very convenient that, you know, this really high-level story about a product that we all know and, you know, most people love is painting Tesco's as the good guy. And that might be me being slightly cynical, that this is an opportunity for Tesco to say, yeah, you're coming here and you're paying high prices, but it's not our fault. We've got nothing to do with it. At the same time as they're making lots of profits, which they're perfectly within their right to do. But it feels like they're trying to absolve themselves of any responsibility whatsoever, using something that is a very, you know, ketchup is something that everybody knows about and can relate to. So it's a very easy bit of media manipulation from them, I think.
Oh, look at you getting all technical as to why there's a big old cynical as to why there's a row. It's rather like when there was a row about Marmite, and then everybody went out and bought Marmite. So they're all going to be rushing off and making sure that... I mean, I do always make sure that I've got ketchup and mayo salad cream. Salad cream is particular. I know it's an acquired taste. Quite a lot of people get a bit sniffy about salad cream as opposed to mayo. But I think a salad cream with... If you never had it?
I don't think so.
Heinz salad cream. My God, it goes beautifully with a sandwich. Cheese and lettuce sandwich. I mean, one of the dullest combinations ever, but quite nice. And I have to say, a Heinz salad cream with a piece of asparagus. It's a thing to behold.
Sounds so nice.
All right, okay, all right. These millennials, they don't understand. They don't understand 1970s cookery methods. Anyway, let's talk about. It's filling my edge now. Let's talk about the BMA. What are they called for?
Yeah, so the BMA voted yesterday to offer free abortions to not only Americans, but anybody internationally that comes to the UK. And that's obviously in response to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. It was quite far from unanimous. There was quite a few people in the BMA that spoke out saying they thought it was a mistake. But it's obviously going to be a very, very big story. And there's a couple facets to it. There's obviously an economic one. That's the reality with healthcare. There is a more moral question as well.
There is.
But it's a big one.
It certainly is a big one. Whether the BMA should be calling for that, I have no idea. Anyway, Noah, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Noah Khogali, political commentator, bringing us up to date on all the stories from the papers. It's much appreciated. Thank you for doing that.